Welcome to the Organizational Transformation Kung Fu Podcast with your hosts, Sandi Varecchia and Jennifer Long.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Organizational Transformation Kung Fu with me, Jen Long from Own Up in Denver, Colorado, and my co-host, Sandi Varecchia from Satori Consulting in Toronto, Canada. Hello, Sandi.
Hello, Jen. So excited to have another podcast with you.
Yes, here we go again. And today, fair listeners, we are going to be talking about the practice and the discipline and the patience you're going to need, the Kung Fu part, around change and a change mindset. And, just the word change. Aren't you excited? People love change. They want stuff to be different. They want it to be different all the time.
Every day, every minute. Every day you're going to work. Please make it different.
Make it different. Yes, please. So obviously, no, people aren't a big fan. Well, some people are. Some people handle change absolutely beautifully, and some people don't, and it's a messy thing. And so we thought we would spend some time because the change that leaders have to deal with, and leading technically is always about change. And so when you are in the leading place in the organization, you are probably standing in change most of the time. And that's what makes you a good leader, is really what are your skills? What are your capabilities? What is your mindset around change, and how do you do it effectively? So we're going to talk a little bit about that today in an effort to help you all maybe get some different models, some different ways of thinking, some understandings, some things that go, yes, thank you very much. That helps me a lot. That's the whole point.
Yeah. And it's a big topic. It's one that I think we've touched on many times in many podcasts and in different forms. But, change is here to stay, right? And change is faster. Like, we're living in this VUCA world right now where things are coming at us so much more quickly, and the uncertainty. And so it becomes really more important for individuals to think about their own change mindset and their own relationship with change when things are happening within organizations or outside organizations. All of these tips that we talk about doesn't have to be applied just inside in work, right? It can be to relationships and things like that as well. But we're talking in the work context, that it's not going to go away. So what is your relationship with change? What's the mindset?
Right. So one of the things that I'm teaching now in a leadership development program is a model that comes from the Novelint Group, which is looking at 3 aspects of organizational transformation, literally. And they've got 3 aspects: leading self, leading others, and leading the organization, which is to say that transformation happens within you, the leader, the person. And then it also happens amongst who you work with, right? Who are your stakeholders within the organization, and how you're working together transforming because you have transformed. And then as you change your relationships of your stakeholders, then how does that transform the organization itself by virtue of the change in the processes or the systems or the structures that you're operating in, because that's all shifted. And so those 3 areas there's a lot that can go on in all of those areas. But the key thing around the model is that it starts with you, but all of those things happen in synchronicity. It's not you change and then people change and then the organization changes. It all happens in different relationships at different times across different parts of the company. It's not something that happens in an orderly
That's
predictable.
not linear,
It's
very
not,
dynamic.
it's definitely
Right.
not a linear experience. And so I think the first thing to really talk about is your own personal sense of how do you think about change? What is your mindset around change? And if you're going to lead change, what's changing for you personally? And if nothing is changing for you, then you're not leading change because you're not different. I'll let you talk a
Right.
little bit more.
Right. Well, I think that really comes to your understanding of sort of the why behind the change, right? If you understand the why behind the change, you can then start to change your behavior and your relationship with that change. So again, understanding what that is, first of all, first and foremost, becomes really important. So why is there a need to change? And if there is a need to change that I understand, what do I need to do as an individual, as a leader within an organization to make that change happen? Because as you just said, Jen, if I don't change, even if I acknowledge that the change is necessary, then nothing changes. And
Right.
so that awareness, first of all, first and foremost, that understanding of the need to change and how I need to, as a leader, change along with it in order to make it happen is critically important.
Yeah. It's personal. And you personally have to have a relationship with the why, and you personally have to have a willingness and an openness for it. And if you don't, right, you're in the wait and see. You're in the and I think that's an interesting, and this is one of those things that when you really work with leaders and you start to ask maybe some deeper questions around um, their capacity on this, right? And I think the longer you are in a role, um, sometimes the more difficult this is to really be accepting.
Yes. Well, because sometimes, and maybe you haven't seen this, Jen, but some people get a bit jaded about change, right? Here it comes again. And if I just sit back, it will pass by just like every other change. And so again, complacency can be a killer of strategy, and you need to be aware of where you sit as a leader or within that change so that you're not complacent is sort of number one to that. The other is knowing that change is coming maybe from the top, and where do you fit into it, and is becomes important. So you need to be able to and willing to ask questions about the why behind it. Like, I don't understand why we're doing this change. I don't understand why now, or the overarching why are we doing it at all. And being willing to say, I think we've tried this before. What is different about this so that I can support it, right? We talked in our last podcast about being vulnerable. This is one of those moments where, as individuals within an organization, relative to change, you need to be vulnerable and ask the questions that will help support you to sort of get on that change track.
Right. And so we talked about there's a model, because I think models help you think about how you think about stuff, right? And not all models are correct. In fact, none of them probably are, but they kind of help you think about how you think about something, which can give you a leg up into, so where am I on this? And so the one that we think is helpful is it's a model by a gal named Cy Wakeman, and that's CY is her first name, Wakeman, and it's called the Pyramid of Readiness. And what I like about what she does is she doesn't use the word change. She uses the word ready. And are you
Readiness.
business ready for what's next? Because what's next is different than what we're doing now. And kind of put it in those terms, kind of takes some of that, oh, it's a change initiative kind of thing. And how many of those are we going to do? As opposed to really kind of thinking about the reason change is happening all the time is because it's about business ready. We're not just doing it to do it, right? The market's changing, the nature of technology is changing, like all of that stuff. We have to flow with it. And if we're going to be ready for the market, we're going to be ready for what we're looking to do in terms of growing, in terms of new product development, in terms of just, increasing our ability to manufacture, whatever it might be, what business ready demands shifts and changes in investments that impact in all those places. So her pyramid starts with awareness, which is kind of what we're talking about. Is what's your level of awareness around what's shifting, what the change is about, what business ready is going to be defined as, right? What are the uh, trends and strategies and deliverables that are being talked about? And that's not just, I mean, you got to know that at the top. You got to know that what does that mean for a division? Like it's an encompassing level of awareness. And if you're aware, are your mid-level people aware, and what are you doing to create awareness, right? And this is where all that communication strategy starts to come in.
So incredibly important. That whole awareness piece, when I think about change efforts that I've seen along the way and in the many years that I've been working, they sort of talk about it coming from the top. So if we communicate down, everybody will follow because we've communicated, and we know just anecdotally, maybe we know it truthfully, just by saying it does not mean that people understand it. Even if you say it over and over and over again, there may not be that level of understanding. So you need to engage in conversation. You need to allow that conversation to happen. You need to allow people to ask questions, for people to, again, understand that alignment of where they are, and that working knowledge of the change and how it impacts them and how it's going to impact the organization globally. Connecting those dots, not as easy for some as for others. And so looking at the sea of people in front of you and looking for the faces that are really kind of scratching their heads trying to understand it and having deeper conversations with them, because the resistant to change people are often because they haven't processed it enough, or you haven't created enough awareness for them to connect those dots for them.
Right.
And
And
so
to
we want to make
critically
sure.
get excited about what the
Yeah.
opportunity really is. And alignment
Mhm.
in and of itself, we always think of alignment as this outcome, but alignment is really an ongoing conversation, right?
Yeah.
Alignment never stops. Alignment is the continuous, here's where we are, how are you thinking about it, and what's holding you back, right? What are your barriers, and what and being able to gauge where have we thought this through, where have we not thought this through, based on what those conversations illustrate and what you learn in those conversations around alignment, and making sure that your message is consistent, right? That you're really creating the same level of awareness every time you talk to it. And I think that what the mistake in the thinking is, because at the top levels, you're talking about it sooner and more frequently, you start to think people know, and they don't.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. I was reading a book about organizational change by Ken Blanchard, and the number sixth thing he says, or fourth thing he says, is that there's no compelling reason to change, so it will fail, or that the business case hasn't been clearly communicated. And so again, it's how does it filter down? And you've got to remember, when that change initiative sort of comes to fruition, right? So we need to do X, Y, and Z. The people who have decided to do X, Y, and D have lived it and breathed it for a long time, months, probably, maybe even a year, before it starts trickling down. So that awareness, it may be really solid and concrete at one level, but you need to be able to bring it down so others, because how do you change as an individual? How do you lean into the change? You need to help them understand the awareness for them.
Right.
So again, just because you communicate doesn't mean that others understand to the same level.
So let's assume we've got awareness. Next
Yes.
level up on her business readiness pyramid is about willing, right? And are you willing? So now that you understand and you've heard and you're aware and you've asked your questions and you've had the conversation, maybe twice, who knows, are you committed to what it's going to take to support doing something differently, leaning into what this shift is about, what the change is about, right? Are you making a personal choice to buy in?
Mm-hmm.
And
It's
I just
that
feel
desire
like
to change.
that's the question at the end of every alignment session is, are you willing to
Are
commit?
you on the bus or off the bus? Right?
Yes. And if We've talked to you about what you are struggling with and you disagree. Are you willing to disagree and commit?
Yes.
Right? Because
Yes.
you don't have to have agreement. What you want is commitment. And I think that it's interesting when you get into the alignment conversation that there's an unsettled feeling that we have to have agreement, and you don't.
No, 100% buy-in. Agreement, buy-in, maybe interchangeably, not necessary. Like we talk about the board level all the time, right? You can debate and you can hash things out, and you can have people that don't agree in totality of something, but the willingness and the desire to change, they're going to get on the bus and they're going to act and behave as though they have. Say your piece, but stay, act with one voice once you leave. And I think that's really critically important. You don't
Yeah.
have to have 100% consensus. And you
Yeah,
can't, probably.
you may not like the play the coach is calling, but if you're wearing the uniform, are you going to make the play? And if you don't want
That's
to
right.
make the play, sit on the bench. And we'll see you sitting on the bench, and we're going to recognize you're on the bench. And then we'll have a conversation about that. But it's to spend any energy on people who are going to disagree and who are going to obstruct that, those are the people you don't give your time and attention to. You really want to focus in on the people who are in the willing place, and even the people who are just in a kind of a wait and see, but will commit by virtue of the fact that better to than not. That's the energy, and that's where your momentum sits. It does not help you to spend time and energy at dealing with the people who disagree.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's that quadrant. I don't know all the quadrants, but I remember years ago, it was the Golden Eagles. And it was like, as leaders, where are you spending your time? Are you spending with the Golden Eagles, the people that are, helping you and furthering your strategy? Or are you spending your time with the people that have, low desire and low everything?
Yeah.
As leaders, sometimes you think, well, we got to spend our time there because we need to bring them along. But they're not likely going to come along, right? And you're going to put a whole lot of energy into these people, when if you just put that same energy or even less energy into the people that want to support it and are willingness and have that awareness, you're going to move mountains.
You're gonna
Really, where are you
actually
spending your
move.
time?
Yeah. And that's that whole tipping
Yeah.
point thing, right? Is
Yeah.
find your volume and your tipping point, and don't spend the energy. And when we're saying that, we're not saying you shouldn't have the conversation with folks to understand what they disagree with, right? You want to understand what the disagreement about. You have that opportunity one time, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then either address it, make modifications if necessary, but don't spend an inordinate amount of time and energy. And maybe you're tempted to do that because we're afraid we're going to lose people. We're afraid we're going to, whatever it is. And at the end of the day, if those people are actively working against you, you don't want them.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want them. So don't get freaked out about, well, we're not going to be able to replace these kind of people, right? And what you have to
But
remember
haven't you heard that a
is,
lot, Jen, in the last little while, since COVID?
say that again.
We can't replace them, so we can't lose them.
Yeah,
Sorry, we're froze there for a bit.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
but
that's
we can't lose them because we can't replace them. And that's a bad spot to be in, because you're really handcuffed to the wrong people, and you're making decisions based on bad information.
right. And it's important to remember in that moment, right, when you're freaked out about that, um, people have the desire to connect, right? And when you've got momentum and you're focused on the people who are willing, and that momentum should bring a percentage of those people along anyway, because at some point they're going to
Mm-hmm.
go, okay, everybody else is on board and I'm not. I need to get
Yeah.
on board. And they just might be slow to get there. And then the ones who really aren't there aren't really going to be a fit for your future business. And that's okay. And that's okay. And so that's why
Absolutely.
you don't want to
Yeah.
spend a lot of energy there, because they'll either eventually want to connect, or they will be very clearly not a good fit.
Right. Which is just a clear misalignment, right? And we know that it happens in organizations. So making sure that we're not hanging on for the wrong reasons. And that's a conversation that I think I have daily these days with organizations that are freaked out about this. So awareness, willingness. You're going to have a whole contingent of people that are willing to make the change because they understand. They're willing to support. Um, Next on the pyramid,
Next,
advocacy.
advocacy. And what do we mean by advocacy? What's a good advocate for change?
We want the people that are behind it, right? We want the change agents to sort of sing it from the rooftop and be advocates for it, because that again will bring those others along the continuum a lot faster when there's multiple voices, not just one or two.
Right? So it's people who have clear understanding of the business case. It's people who are really good at influencing other people in the organization, right? Those, you've got influencers who have a circle of you can tap into those people. Who are they? I had one client who just did a whole survey figuring out who their influencers were specifically so that they could tap those people and bring them strategically into a culture shift as advocates, because they're the ones who are going to be the visible supporters for whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
So I was telling you before we started, this change initiative that one client's doing, and they have 7 big buckets of things that they need to change. There's a lot of change that has to happen at many different levels on kind of lenses, from customers all the way to stakeholders to community, all that sort of thing. And that was my whole thing: is you need an executive sponsor for each of these changes, but you need to find those change agents, those advocates for you at each bucket to help move it forward. Larger organizations may not be, they may be hidden along the way. So find out who they are. Who are your advocates? Who are the ones that understand, will stand behind you, stand at the top of the mountain, wave the flag so others will follow. Very important.
Exactly. And then as you go up the pyramid, you're looking for people who are also in a place of active participants, right? So advocates are, in a sense, active participants when you start to leverage them specifically and strategically, as opposed to them just kind of by nature doing what they would do, is to advocate. But when you think about where you are in your own change mind, are you an active participant? Are you willing to move things forward? Are you actually adapting to whatever the new expectation is, the new behavior is, the new structure, whatever that might be? And are you formulating and implementing your own the plans accordingly? Right? Are you shifting gears? Are you engaging? So if we go to that model of when you're engaging with your stakeholders, what's changing there? What's the actual shift in the cadence of the meeting, the tenor of the meeting, the structure of the conversation, how you make the decisions, right? And what's prioritized, and the implications on what that changes relative to processes and systems. Like, that's the active participation where things become practiced different. You feel, you show up different. You're engaging in ways you no longer have these things happening. Things have stopped and other things have started.
Yes. Yeah. Tone is really important, shifting in that. The words that you're using, how are they different today than they were tomorrow around this? So many things that sort of move the continuum along. But again, it's that how are you leading self in this change, is thinking about yourself along all of these touch points, or these points along the pyramid, if you will.
Yeah. And having an idea of what a leading indicator looks like to know if you're actually getting there, right? And language is a great one. Are we talking about it differently? Lagging indicators are our stories changing? Are the tales of what's happening in the organization, are the stories changing? Do we talk about things differently? Are there new stories that we haven't heard before?
Yeah, and I like to use proof points. What are the proof points that things are changing, right? So we really think about, well, how can we say if it's changed? Give me a proof point that says, yeah, that actually happened. And so again, really trying to sort of make something concrete, right? Really looking at it sort of black and white.
Right. So what are you measuring? What, create that proof point.
Yeah.
Right. And the top of the pyramid. So once you're an active participant, the top of the pyramid is a driver. What are you doing to drive the actual shift? Right. And so you have changed as who you are as a leader, how you're showing up as a leader. Your paradigm has shifted because when you're driving, you then can't not see it. You then are in that place of um, being able to see the horizon of what else is going to impact this and add value. And you're already there and you're already anticipating how you're going to either accelerate the momentum or add additional value to what the effort is. And that's where they really feel like, okay, I've got a handle on this.
You hit your stride.
Yeah.
Right. You're driving it. And I think it's important to remember that at any given time, you could be a driver of change in one change aspect, but you still could be sort of in another area, in the awareness stage of another change aspect that's happening in an organization. So when you're thinking about yourself, it's where are you in every different change aspect that's happening. And so, and you're going to be at different points at different times. And that's just the reality of it. It's not linear. Nothing at an organization or business is ever linear. So it's a cycle, and the cycles will change and be at different points at different times.
Right. And every once in a while, it's worth it to stand outside yourself and look at yourself relative to, I'm going into a meeting about this. Where am I on this? Because if I know where I am, right, and if I'm on low awareness, I'm on the bottom of the pyramid, I've got to pick up the ball and start asking more questions so I can really start to understand, right? I sense this is happening. And I think that's where, if we're in that mindset of, if I don't ask, I don't, if I don't ask or no, I don't know, it's not gonna, I don't know. And it's not on me. And it is.
Yeah, it totally is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that whole notion of self-reflection, we talk about it a lot, because I think as leaders, to be a good leader, you need to be able to have strong processes and around self-reflection. They could be journaling, they could be moments in time where, like, before I go into this meeting, I really need to think about this. But you really need to be thinking about yourself a lot, about where you are in different aspects and at different times, because how you show up is critical, but you have to sort of understand why you're showing up the way you are. And so if you're not doing some sort of self-reflection several times in a day, to start doing it, start baking the time into your schedule to think about that, because it will make you a stronger leader, whether you're looking at this change pyramid and around self, or anything to do with leadership. Self-reflection is key. So when you're thinking about change, leading self, leading others, and leading the organization, leading self is that first bucket of that you really need to tackle.
Exactly. And it's not all about what the future state is. And it's an interesting thing when you really start to think about change and your change mindset. That moment of self-reflection is not also just about, am I willing, where am I on the pyramid, but where is my sense of dissatisfaction with where I am today, where I am, right? Because really kind of taking the time to talk about what's dissatisfying is really more of a motivator to move into a shift, to actually take on a change, right? It's not the ideal future that's so compelling, because we're all a little bit skeptical about how ideal is that, right? And how will it really be that, or will it be something closely resembling that, but not necessarily, right? So because we're gauging that, but what we're really clear on and what we're very familiar with is what we don't like and what we're unhappy about and what makes this, where we are right now, suck so bad. And taking some time to really find that is also part of what creates the willingness, what creates the energy to actually do it differently. So I'm going to throw that in there, because my job is to agitate your discontent.
Yeah. Very good. Leading self is the first sort of aspect around that change mindset, right? Which is really all we're going to be talking about today. There's other components to it, but the Cy Wakeman model is a really good one to look at. Right? We look at the different steps, which was the awareness, the willingness, the becoming an advocate, being an active participant, and then being a driver and an influence of change, knowing that you could be anywhere on that pyramid at any given time, at any given aspect of change throughout a day, throughout the week, throughout the organization, throughout the month. And that's okay.
Yes.
And I think the other thing I'd probably add into that is sort of reflecting on your teams to sort of understand where they might be individually or collectively on any given change, right? That's a really good starting point to say, I don't feel like we're moving forward as a team. Let's talk about this model as to see where we are. And again, opening that conversation and that dialogue to say, what do we need to do collectively differently? Or, how do we express our dissatisfaction and sort of try to get that out of the way in order to make the change happen? So you are leading self, but if you're a team leader, you could look at, how are we collectively shifting or not shifting?
Right.
And how can
and there's much to learn in that dialogue. And we talked before in our last podcast a little bit about the lies we tell ourselves. And when you're looking at a change mindset, you really want to start to understand, what are the stories you tell yourself, and are they true? And is that story you're telling yourself holding you back? Because is what you think is true just no longer true and you're not ready? Right? Or can you see what the new truth is and you've got specific resistance around that? And those conversations, when we talk about alignment, let's talk about ourselves on this pyramid. Those are the questions you want to ask. That's what you're listening for.
Yeah. Yeah. And observing. You're asking, you're listening, and you're observing. Because, if it's not said, lots can be seen with how people, tone, mannerisms, body language, all that sort of stuff. Right?
Yes.
And then you can start engaging. So there's so many tools that are available to you. Use them. Right?
Yeah.
Use them.
All right. So the big lesson starts with you, how you lead and how you think about change and where are you on the pyramid? Start there, then bring your team in.
Yeah. And start talking about, in terms of readiness as opposed to change. How positive is that versus change, which can be construed as negative? So shift language.
Yeah.
Right, to bring people along. I think it's a brilliant way to reframe the agitation that comes with change.
Right.
Let's talk about readiness.
Right.
Perfect.
All right. Well, that's it for the podcast today. Thanks so much for downloading and listening. Tell your friends, give us comments. We'd love to hear from you. We want to know, tell us what else you want to hear about. We want to know that as well. So open to ideas, gang.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening and do share your ideas. Jen and I are loving doing this, and we want to hear more from you, from what we can do to help support your leadership journey.
All right. Well, until next time, have fun in Toronto.
Thank you. Have fun in Colorado.
All right.
Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Talk soon. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. You can check out Sandi's website at satoriconsultinginc.ca. That's SATORI consultinginc.ca. And visit Jen's website at own-up.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.